late October 2024, a Czech land survey drone scanning forested terrain outside Brno detected a heat anomaly deep beneath the soil, an impossible reading for an area abandoned since the war. Within days, excavation crews unearthed a rusted steel hatch embossed with the faded insignia of the Waffen-SS and a codeplate reading Winterseed, Anlage 47. Behind it lay a sealed tunnel, leading to a subterranean network untouched for nearly 80 years. Inside were German documents stamped Geheime Reichssache, Soviet ammunition crates dated 1949, and fragments of biocontainment cylinders etched with chemical hazard symbols decades ahead of their time. What began as a geological survey has now drawn NATO forensic teams, Czech intelligence, and historians into a single question that neither Berlin nor Moscow will address. Why did both powers build upon the same secret? And why was it buried so deep that even the earth tried to forget? Chapter 1. The bunker beneath the Bavarian pines. The discovery site was registered as grid reference 47°30N, 11°45E, a dense stretch of Bavarian forest typically closed to public access due to unexploded ordnance warnings. The initial drilling was conducted under a municipal reforestation contract, not an archaeological one, which made the report of metallic resonance beneath subsoil layer Delta 3 stand out on the engineering logs. Within 48 hours, local police were replaced by agents from the Bundesnachrichtendienst, BND, who erected temporary fencing and declared the site restricted under Article 87 of the German Security Code. From that moment, it ceased being a forestry project and became an intelligence operation. By the time independent historian Dr. Lena Hartmann received word of the discovery, the site had already been mapped, sealed, and reclassified. Hartmann, a specialist in late-war German industrial projects, managed to obtain copies of early survey imagery through a leaked contractors. File dated 02 March 2024. The images showed what appeared to be an underground corridor reinforced with blast-proof walls and a series of pressure doors, each marked with the word Versuchsraum, or test chamber. At the far end of the main passage was a secondary bulkhead embossed with the letters PMR5. No public archive referenced any installation under that code. Historical cross-referencing led Hartmann to a footnote in an Allied intelligence document, Schaff Archive File, number 71, 1945, OMZ 117, which briefly mentioned unverified reports of an experimental fuel and propulsion facility west of the Isar River, presumed destroyed by retreating German units. But there was no record of demolition, no eyewitness confirmation, and no recovery logs. For decades, historians assumed the facility had been a myth, one of many rumoured Wunderwaffe bunkers said to vanish in the chaos of 1945. Now, for the first time, evidence suggested otherwise. When the first chamber was breached, a stillness hung inside like a preserved breath of war. The air was acrid with a chemical tang. Metal shelves bore sealed jars of unknown compounds, their glass darkened and labels in fading Sütterlin script. Near one of the workstations, a brass nameplate read Dr. A. Reinhardt, Technische Leitung, the same name found in a 1944 personnel manifest of the Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde, the German Army's experimental center for rocketry and propulsion. This raised immediate alarms. If Morgenrot shared personnel with Peenemünde, it was not a mere research outpost. It was an extension of a weapons program never officially recorded. Decontamination teams catalogued everything, logging artifacts under BND case code, Project Morgenrot, Actina, B624-2024. Among the recovered items were 3 60mm film reels stored in a rusted container stamped Oberkommando, Vertraulich. One reel was successfully digitized before the film deteriorated. The footage showed men in heavy protective suits operating cylindrical tanks while a voiceover, likely Dr. Reinhardt's, described Energieübertragung ohne Treibstoff, or energy transfer without fuel. The frames following this contained an abrupt cut to a test platform engulfed in smoke. Analysts noted that the setup resembled an early pulse jet array, but none consistent with known wartime designs. The original sound was muted, but in the final seconds of the reel, a handwritten note flashed before the camera. Versuch 12A abgebrochen, Austritt instabil. Test 12A aborted, emission unstable. As news of the leak spread, historians and military analysts began piecing together fragments of a program that had escaped history's reach. One document, partially burned but legible, referred to a Directive 212-45 issued by the Reich Ministry of Armaments ordering continuation of Morgenrot operations independent of fuel supply chain. Collapse. The language implied research into alternative propulsion systems, possibly chemical or electromagnetic. The concept aligned disturbingly with rumors of Nazi interest in plasma and ion experimentation near the war's end. Yet none of these projects were supposed to have survived beyond blueprints. Someone, it seemed, had not only preserved Morgenrot, but had attempted to conceal it beneath the Bavarian soil. In May 2024, following weeks of silence, a redacted statement from the German Federal Archive confirmed that artifacts of historical and potential security significance were recovered, pending scientific analysis. Privately, two Bundeswehr officers, speaking under anonymity to investigative journalist Felix Brandt, described unexplained magnetic interference readings inside the bunker, forcing repeated equipment recalibration. One noted that the deeper chambers contained sealed conduits feeding into rock walls where no cables were visible. When asked about the possibility of post-war modification, both declined to comment, further complicating matters. A 1946 U.S. Army Counterintelligence Corps (CIC) memorandum surfaced in a Freedom of Information release in Washington, referencing unconfirmed operations by U.S. engineering personnel in an unregistered Bavarian facility between April and July of that year. The memo, signed by Lieutenant Colonel R.K. Yates, claimed that American forces investigated a sealed installation of unknown function believed linked to German research in propulsion systems. The final line read simply, "Site rendered inaccessible under Joint Allied Directive. No further action recommended." What happened in those months remains unverified, but the overlap between the 1946 operation and the rediscovered coordinates is undeniable. If American forces entered the bunker, they did so quietly and without record. No physical trace of post-war Allied presence was detected in the recovered soil layers. Yet the reinforced doors bore welding patterns inconsistent with 1940s German design, possibly later modifications to seal the site from within. By autumn 2024, the investigation had reached an impasse. Every agency involved refused comment, the official excavation halted, and Hartmann's research requests were denied, pending national review. But one unfiled image from her leaked set shows the final chamber partially illuminated. A control dais centered around a smooth, circular platform. Embedded into the concrete is a symbol, a stylized sun rising over a horizon line. The emblem matches that of the Morgenrot insignia, documented in a single surviving letter from 1944, found years earlier in a private collection. The translation of that letter ends with a chilling phrase: "When the dawn rises, Germany will no longer need oil." For 80 years, it lay hidden beneath the Bavarian pines, sealed behind concrete and silence. Whatever project Morgenrot achieved, or failed to achieve, remains locked within those chambers, guarded now not by soldiers, but by the weight of classified history. What began as a forestry survey had become something far darker, the reawakening of a secret engineered to vanish with the Reich itself. Chapter 2. The Reinhardt Correspondence Archive. 3 months after the Bavarian site was sealed by federal order, an encrypted email reached Dr. Lena Hartmann's university inbox. It contained a single file, a scanned letter dated 12th of February 1945, typed on Reich Ministry stationery and signed by Dr. Anton Reinhardt. The sender was anonymous, routed through a VPN in Zurich, but the file's metadata traced back to an IP block used by the Bundesarchiv Koblenz. The letter referenced continuation of Morgenrot trials under Relocation Directive RM3-17B and named an unlisted secondary facility somewhere within the Sudeten border region. In the postscript, Reinhardt wrote a single line: "All remaining correspondences to be filed under the Kruger sequence." The term had never appeared in any known wartime archive. Hartmann contacted journalist Felix Brandt, whose earlier reporting on the Morgenrot discovery had already drawn quiet warnings from military officials. Together, they examined the image file for watermark patterns and discovered a faded stamp in the corner. Bundesarchiv, vorläufig gesperrt, temporarily restricted. That classification was reserved for documents pending security clearance, an indication that someone inside the archives had accessed sealed material. Within days, they found what they believed to be the source. Bundesarchiv Record Group 472.B, Correspondence, Reinhardt, Kruger Sequence, 1943-1945. The entire folder, though catalogued in the early 1990s, was still officially non-existent on digital inventories. A confidential contact within the archive, who agreed to speak under the name MK, confirmed that Record Group 472B had been held in a locked cabinet since its discovery in a private estate near Innsbruck in 1987. The documents were recovered from the attic of a former Luftwaffe officer, Hauptmann Dieter Kruger, who allegedly served as logistical liaison for Project Morgenrot. When the files were assessed, their contents were deemed sensitive, and the entire lot was quietly sequestered. MK managed to view only one page before the cabinet was re-secured, a requisition order for non-fuel-based thrust vectoring apparatus, prototype series B12, dated 19th of January 1945. By late June 2024, Hartmann and Brandt travelled to Innsbruck to trace Kruger's estate records. According to property files held at the Tirolisches Landesarchiv, the house had been confiscated by US occupation forces in 1946 under the War Property Control Act. An inspection report filed by CIC officer Lieutenant Frank V. Heller, case log 4322P, referenced technical documents of uncertain origin and noted that materials seized were transferred to Munich Holding Depot, 17th April 1946. The Munich depot was a known stopover for captured research archives before they were either repatriated or absorbed into Allied scientific programs. However, the Morgenrot materials were never logged as transferred or destroyed. They simply vanished. Weeks later, a former CIC clerk, now 98 and living in Maryland, agreed to speak via recorded interview. His name was Harold Stevens, and he remembered the Munich depot vividly. There was a crate, heavy as hell, he said, marked with a red sun, just the rays showing. We called it the Sunrise Box. Didn't know what was in it, just knew it was bound for Wright Field. Wright Field, later Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, was the hub for post-war technological analysis. Stevens swore that after that shipment left Munich, the paperwork disappeared, and so did the crate. In August 2024, Brandt obtained a declassified US Air Technical Intelligence Report, document 453879WF, titled Evaluation of Recovered Propulsion Devices, Bavarian Sector. It made no mention of Morgenrot or Reinhardt, but one paragraph described an experimental combustionless acceleration unit exhibiting anomalous electromagnetic readings. The technology was said to have been incomplete and inoperable, but its design indicated potential strategic significance. The final page of the report was missing, replaced by a stamp. Project transferred, classified under MJ-12-2B. While MJ-12 was historically dismissed as conspiracy folklore, the suffix 2B matched internal air technical intelligence file patterns from the late 1940s. The implication was chilling. Morgenrot's remnants may have been absorbed into US post-war research. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the Bundesarchiv issued a quiet press release announcing a routine audit of restricted materials. Within 24 hours, Record Group 472.B vanished from the physical catalogue. Hartmann's access credentials were revoked, and an unmarked envelope arrived at her home, inside. A Polaroid photograph of her standing near the Bavarian dig site, taken from an elevated vantage point. Written on the back, "Stop digging." The image was postmarked Frankfurt, but no sender was listed. Undeterred, Hartmann persisted. She began compiling what she called the Reinhardt Correspondence Archive, combining all known documents, letters, and recovered fragments associated with the project. The emerging timeline suggested that Reinhardt had relocated his core research team from Bavaria to a facility near Brno in early 1945, just months before Germany's surrender. The Brno region, at that time, part of the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, was littered with subterranean construction sites built by forced labour. Many were sealed after the war and never mapped. One stood out: Complex Winterseed, an underground network rediscovered in 2021 but never fully explored due to chemical contamination. Reinhardt's final recorded dispatch mentioned transport of stabilized medium to Winterseed sector for final containment. If Morgenrot's prototypes or fuel substitutes were moved to Winterseed, it would explain why the Bavarian site was found largely empty of power systems and test cores. The core research, the real secret, had been relocated before the Allies advanced. The timing aligned perfectly with known Soviet troop movements toward the east. Reinhardt was fleeing not the Americans, but the Russians. On 14 September 2024, a Czech environmental agency filed an incident report detailing unauthorized excavation near the Brno forests. Security camera footage from a nearby gas station showed two unidentified vehicles entering the area after midnight. Within 48 hours, both were found abandoned, their license plates removed. Soil samples later taken from the site revealed traces of copper sulfate and deuterium compounds, consistent with early synthetic fuel experimentation. The area was sealed off once again, this time under NATO supervision. For Hartmann and Brandt, the trail had shifted from archive to ground. Every clue pointed toward one conclusion. Project Morgenrot was not an isolated experiment. It was the beginning of a transnational post-war transfer, an unacknowledged exchange of research between collapsing Axis institutions and the victorious Allied powers. If true, it meant the technologies buried in Bavaria and Bohemia were not merely lost relics, but the foundation of classified propulsion research programs that continued long after 1945. As autumn turned to winter, Hartmann made one final note in her field journal, dated 22 November 2024. The letters, the crates, the seals, they were not remnants. They were breadcrumbs left deliberately. Someone wanted this rediscovered, but not by accident. The Kruger sequence isn't an archive, it's a map. Her next destination, the tunnels beneath Brno, where the final chapter of Reinhardt's correspondence was believed to have been buried under 70 years of silence. Chapter 3. The Winterseed Excavation Files, the Czech Republic, March 2025. A restricted perimeter was erected around the wooded hills near Brno, where environmental teams had previously detected residual nerve agents. The area, now designated Site CZ7B, lay above an old Soviet exclusion zone, sealed since the 1950s. Historical records listed it as a post-war chemical waste depot, yet newly surfaced photographs from 1945 obtained by historian Dr. Lena Hartmann, showed Wehrmacht supply trucks entering the same valley weeks before Germany's surrender. Their cargo manifests, written in coded abbreviations, included an entry labeled MW Stoff, Phase 2 Stabilisiert. The letters MW were consistent with Morgenrot's internal shorthand. Morgenrot Werkstoffe, morning red materials. When excavation began, Czech officials worked quietly under NATO environmental oversight, their stated goal to neutralize lingering toxins. But in early April, a drone scan registered hollow anomalies beneath the limestone ridge. The voids were geometric, rectilinear structures, not natural formations. On April 7th, a controlled drill penetrated a concrete barrier at a depth of 31 meters. Through the borehole, cameras captured a chamber lined with intact steel support beams. A stenciled marking read, Komplex Winterseed, Abschnitt B2. That discovery alone contradicted every Soviet-era record asserting that Winterseed had been destroyed by controlled demolition in Mädchen Hartmann, arrived in Brno under academic credentials, officially observing as part of a historical materials assessment team. Her access badge, issued by the Czech Ministry of Culture, granted limited entry to the outer excavations. However, field operator logs later revealed that her badge number, Stabia 472B09H, was used inside the primary shaft at least twice when she was documented elsewhere. Someone, perhaps within the excavation team, was using her identity to gain deeper access. When she confronted project manager Pavel Novak, he denied knowledge but admitted off record that military liaison observers had been on site since day one. Inside the main chamber, workers uncovered stacked crates identical to those catalogued in Bavaria, stamped with the Morgenrot insignia, the rising sun over horizon line. Each crate bore serial markings beginning with WSKR. The third crate opened contained a metal cylinder roughly 2 meters long, sealed by corroded clamps. A tag attached to the cylinder's handle bore the name Reinhardt Anton, Project Leitung. Radiation tests showed mild ionization but no dangerous levels. The cylinder was transferred to a secure vault at the Masaryk University Radiological Institute. Its contents remained classified. Alongside the physical discoveries came documents, brittle papers wrapped in wax cloth, remarkably preserved. Among them was a field log dated 28th of April 1945 and signed by an SS Sturmbannführer Heinrich Lenz, detailing transport of 6 sealed units to Brunn sector for safeguard under Winterseed directive, authorization by AR. The log referenced a stabilized energy medium, confirming that Reinhardt's team relocated experimental cores from Bavaria days before Allied occupation. The implication was that Morgenroth's main research survived the war, hidden beneath Czechoslovak soil, before Soviet troops arrived. Hartmann's notes from April 2025 describe increasing restrictions. NATO supervision replaced Czech management, and soldiers began patrolling the perimeter under the pretense of contamination security. Access logs became classified. Yet one evening, a Czech technician covertly provided Hartmann with a flash drive containing video snippets from the initial borehole feed. The footage showed something she would later describe in her report as a silent room of machines, perfectly preserved waiting. Rows of equipment lined the walls, coils, transformers and sealed conduits resembling high-voltage capacitors. On one panel, a metal plaque read simply, Versuch 12b. Aktiv nicht starten. Test 12b. Do not activate. Attempts to trace any mention of 12b led Hartmann back to the Bavarian film reels recovered months earlier. The last visible frame of reel 3 bore the handwritten note, 12a unstable. If the Winterseed site housed 12b, it meant Morgenroth's next-generation prototype had been relocated and possibly refined after the Bavarian shutdown. A recovered memo from June 1945, addressed to Soviet Commandant General Stepan Rodionov, supports this. It described the capture of German scientific personnel near Brunn associated with fuel-less propulsion experiments. The scientists' names were redacted, but one line remained. Lead engineer Anton R. not located. A deeper search into post-war Soviet archives uncovered declassified document number 26748 MVD, summarizing foreign technology acquisition in the Brno sector. It mentioned a sealed German research annex inaccessible due to contamination, and unexploded munitions. The Soviets abandoned it after recovering. Partial schematic materials, reportedly forwarded to research institutes in Minsk and Kharkov. Decades later, Soviet technicians reported anomalous magnetic readings near the site during pipeline construction in 1961. The area was then sealed permanently. By the third week of excavation in 2025, media presence near Brno had grown uncontrollable. Independent journalists and drone hobbyists captured aerial footage of military convoys entering the forest at night. Satellite images taken by ESA Sentinel-2 showed temporary heat signatures indicative of generators operating underground. Official channels dismissed them as environmental equipment, but Hartmann's correspondence logs reveal her growing fear. They're reactivating something. The air smells of ozone near the ridge. The soldiers wear new patches. No national flag, just a rising sun emblem. They know exactly what they're digging for. On April 29th, excavation abruptly ceased. The Czech government announced unexpected structural instability and restricted the area indefinitely. All personnel were dismissed within 48 hours, including Hartmann. 2 days later, Novak was found dead in his apartment in Brno, apparent suicide. His laptop was missing, his phone wiped clean. Hartmann fled to Vienna, where she shared her collected files with Brandt for safekeeping. Among them was a single declassified photograph, a close-up of an electrical conduit inside Winterseed, dated 1945. Scratched into the metal surface were 3 letters, MJR. Some historians now believe this was the earliest reference to the post-war US intelligence initiative MJ-12-2B, linking Morgenroth directly to American black projects. By May 2025, the Brno excavation site was erased from all public mapping data. Roads leading to it were rerouted, and aerial imagery blurred under security protection. Hartmann's university revoked her tenure, citing ethical misconduct in classified research. Brandt published excerpts of their findings under the title The Winterseed Papers, but within days the website hosting the files was taken offline without notice. Only a handful of cached pages survived, containing fragments of Hartmann's field notes. The final entry, time-stamped 2317 on 28 April 2025, reads, "The hum never stopped. Even sealed, it's alive under the stone. Whether Winterseed's chamber still exists in its original form remains uncertain. Officially, the excavation was sealed to contain hazardous chemical materials. Unofficially, Hartmann's notes suggest that at least one of Morgenrot's cores, the legendary B-series unit, was extracted before the closure. The NATO task force departed without public statement, and somewhere under the pines and limestone, the silence continues, a silence that has lasted 80 years, humming faintly beneath the earth, waiting to be heard again. Chapter 4, Operation Halcyon Retrieval Logs Vienna, June 2025. 2 months after the Brno excavation vanished from public record, an anonymous data packet was uploaded to a private research server registered under the Austrian Institute of Contemporary History. The files, encrypted under the codename Halcyon, contained digitized microfilm reels from the US Army's Technical Intelligence Archives, Fort Belvoir, dated 1946 to 1948. Among the documents were maintenance, manifests referencing asset recoveries from European propulsion facilities. Each sheet carried the stamp MJ12, Subdirectory 2B. For the first time, a direct operational link between Project Morgenrot and post-war Allied technology transfer programs was in plain sight. The recovered logs chronicled Operation Halcyon, a classified retrieval mission authorized by the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee, CIOS, in mid-1946. The objective: to locate, recover, and secure energy displacement apparatuses from undisclosed Axis research locations. According to the manifests, the operation targeted 5 sites across southern Germany and Czechoslovakia. Site 5 matched the coordinates of the Winterseed tunnels. The files list only 3 field officers by surname: Yates, Kavanaugh, and Kruger. The inclusion of that final name, Kruger, suggested the same officer whose estate later yielded the Reinhardt correspondence. His role in both ends of the story was no coincidence. Hartmann, now operating in exile, received the decrypted files through an anonymous contact using the handle Gavin12B embedded. Metadata confirmed the scans originated from a private contractor that once handled Department of Defense archival digitization. She and Brandt began cross-referencing every listed asset under Operation Halcyon. Most referred to mechanical components or documents, but one entry stood out. Package B12B. Status: partial retrieval, non-functional, stored right field Annex 4, Ohio. It was accompanied by a handwritten note. Transferred to Division M, 1949, retained for further electromagnetic analysis. Division M appeared. Nowhere else in official records. Brandt's journalistic instincts pushed him to trace the American trail. Through a Freedom of Information Act, FOA request, he obtained redacted communications between Air Material Command and the Atomic Energy Commission dated 1951. One line, left unredacted by clerical error, read, "Continuation of B12 series experiment to be conducted under Halcyon parameters. Sponsorship shifted to civilian oversight." In the margin, a signature, R.K. Yates, the same Yates who, decades earlier, signed the 1946 memo recommending no further action on the Bavarian site. It appeared no further action had, in fact, meant complete covert continuation. Parallel to the paper trail, another piece of evidence emerged. A retired electrical engineer, now in his late 80s, contacted Brandt under condition of anonymity. He claimed to have worked at Wright Field between 1950 and 1954 under a Division M project. His team received shipments labeled Foreign Origin, Propulsion Study. He described large metallic cylinders with blackened welds and unusual crystalline coatings. "We didn't know what it was," he said in a recorded statement. "But it wasn't any kind of rocket engine. No combustion ports, just containment vessels with internal rings. They said it used magnetic inversion. We called it the silent coil." The description matched Morgenrot's test diagrams. As Brandt prepared to publish the Halcyon findings, he noticed a recurring identifier within the archive scans, a 9-digit number, 842117B3, appearing at the footer of every Halcyon document. When entered into a declassified US National Archives search, it redirected to an empty record titled Closed, National Security Exception. But a mirror database in the United Kingdom revealed a cross-reference. SAB 301-52, Anglo-American Exchange of Technical Intelligence, 1948. That file contained a single paragraph describing energy displacement prototypes recovered by joint US-UK field. Units from Czechoslovakia and southern Germany. The shipment manifest listed 2 items of primary interest. 1. of them was marked Morgenrot Unit B12B, the more Brandt and Hartmann revealed, the closer they came to surveillance. In July 2025, Hartmann noticed intermittent cuts in her home internet connection. Days later, she found a listening device embedded behind a light socket. Austrian authorities refused to investigate, claiming foreign diplomatic privilege. Brandt's Vienna apartment was broken into the same week. His external drives were taken, but his Halcyon printouts remained untouched, as if whoever entered only wanted the digital data, not the story. Hartmann pressed on, uncovering a 1957 CIA memorandum referencing Project Morning Light, evaluation of electromagnetic containment anomalies. Origin, Bavarian research. Morning Light, she realized, was a linguistic translation of Morgenrot. The note concluded with further investigations suspended under NSC Directive 54122. That directive governed covert scientific programs, plausibly denying their existence while allocating black budget funding. If Morgenrot had become Morning Light, then its research had not died with the Reich or been buried in Brno. It had evolved under American classification. The final Halcyon file in the batch contained a photograph. 3 men standing beside a disassembled cylindrical object inside a hangar. The reverse read, Wright Field, Annex 4, 1949. The central figure bore a striking resemblance to Dr. Anton Reinhardt. The file caption identified him only as consultant, AR-12, how a German scientist officially declared, missing in 1945 appeared alive and working for US military research 4 years. Later remains unexplained. No immigration or denazification records exist under his name. Analysts speculate he was brought over under one of the unacknowledged post-operation paperclip transfers, those conducted off the books through naval transport. In late August 2025, Brandt finally published an exposé titled Halcyon, The Forgotten Transfer. Within 12 hours, the article disappeared from every major hosting platform. Mirror sites that tried to repost it were geo-blocked across the EU. His credentials were revoked from the German Press Association, and his bank accounts were frozen for verification. Hartmann, meanwhile, received a courier envelope with a single sheet of paper inside, a scan of the Halcyon mission badge. Below the insignia of the rising sun was a Latin phrase, per ignem silentium, through fire, silence. The Halcyon retrieval logs closed the circle that began in Bavaria. What was once a sealed bunker beneath the pines was no longer just a relic of the Reich, but a cornerstone of a post-war power network that spanned continents. Morgenrot had not been lost, it had been inherited. Every nation that touched its ashes had taken a fragment, rewriting the aftermath of war under layers of classification and denial. And yet, the central question remained. What had Reinhardt built that so many sought to recover, then to bury again? The answer, it seemed, was still sealed somewhere, possibly not in the past, but in plain sight, under another name. Chapter 5, The Morgenrot Continuum, Zurich, September 2025. The encrypted data trail led to a dormant corporate registration filed in 1972 under the name Continuum Energetics AG. The listed address, a nondescript warehouse along the Limmat River, had long since been repurposed as a logistics hub. Yet the company's founding paperwork, retrieved by journalist Felix Brandt through Swiss Federal Archives, revealed its original directors, 2 Swiss nationals, 1 American engineer, and a 4th individual identified only as A. Reinhardt. The signature matched the same looping R from the 1945 Morgenrot engineering notes. The discovery confirmed what Hartmann had suspected for months. Reinhardt had resurfaced under corporate cover during the Cold War, carrying his work into the private sector, under the protection of governments that owed their post-war technological leaps to his research. Continuum Energetics AG held several obscure patents between 1973 and 1981, each concerning non-combustive kinetic generation systems. The patents were filed, approved, then immediately classified under Swiss federal secrecy statutes relating to energy security. The drawings mirrored diagrams from the Morgenrot blueprints, circular induction chambers, counter-rotating coils, and energy dispersion grids that defied conventional fuel mechanics. An internal memo archived in 1978 referenced a B12B derivative prototype tested at undisclosed high-altitude facility. Coordinates were redacted, but cross-referencing weather logs and flight patterns from that year placed the likely location near Groom Lake, Nevada, the same restricted site later synonymous with advanced propulsion testing. Morgenrot had not just been inherited by the United States, it had been institutionalized. Hartmann, operating from a secure apartment in Geneva, began compiling the final dossier. Her notes describe an increasing sense of surveillance, footsteps in hallways, calls disconnecting mid-sentence, subtle rearrangements of her files. In October 2025, she received an unmarked USB drive in the mail containing 3 folders labeled Morgenrot Cont, Halcyon, and Continuum. Inside the first was a short video clip, grainy timestamped 14/09/1979, showing a rotating platform emitting faint blue light within a sealed chamber. Engineers in white suits observed from behind glass. A sign on the wall read, Test 12C. The sound was low but distinct, a steady, rhythmic pulse, identical to the one recorded in the Brno tunnels decades earlier. The continuity was undeniable. Morgenrot's evolution had never ceased. It had merely changed hands. Brandt attempted to verify the footage's authenticity through forensic analysis, discovering metadata suggesting the video was digitized from 8mm film labeled Annex 4. The encoding timestamp matched the numbering system of the Wright-Patterson archival reels. Before he could publish, his email accounts were locked and his digital credentials invalidated. 3 days later, his apartment was searched under a warrant citing data privacy violations. The USB was missing. Within a week, Brandt disappeared while traveling from Vienna to Zurich. His last communication to Hartmann read simply, "They were right about 12C. It wasn't propulsion." Desperate for answers, Hartmann sought help from an archivist inside the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. Using declassified Cold War inspection files, they uncovered a peculiar 1983 internal note describing an unregistered electromagnetic containment test at an unnamed European laboratory. The report referenced radiation anomalies consistent with non-nuclear plasma compression, and the test lead was listed as Dr. A. Reinhardt. No further documentation existed. That year, an explosion destroyed a remote Swiss research site near Davos, officially attributed to a methane leak. Local residents recalled a blue-white flash that lasted longer than lightning. No official acknowledgement was ever made. By late 2025, fragments of Continuum Energetics AG began resurfacing in modern energy conglomerate acquisitions. A recent merger filing revealed that its assets had been absorbed into Helios Dynamics Corporation, a multinational defense contractor headquartered in London with strong NATO affiliations. Helios Dynamics' own patents referenced electrokinetic containment systems and field stress modulation arrays, terms that had not existed before Morgenrot's rediscovery. Their company insignia featured a rising sun crest identical to the symbol on Reinhardt's wartime notes. What began as Nazi experimentation in hidden Bavarian bunkers now powered 21st century research into sustainable military energy platforms. The irony was brutal. The very technology conceived in the twilight of the Third Reich now lit the laboratories of those who had once sought to destroy it. On November 4th, 2025, an anonymous message was posted to a defunct academic forum used by Cold War historians. It contained GPS coordinates 47.4938° N, 8.7195° E, placing it in a wooded area north of Zurich. Attached was a cryptic sentence, "The continuum hums beneath us." Within hours, Hartmann drove to the location. The site was fenced and unmarked, patrolled by security wearing no insignia. From the nearby ridge, she recorded a faint, oscillating vibration detectable even through the ground, the same frequency she had logged years earlier in Bavaria. Whatever Morgenrot had become, it was still operating somewhere below. Her final known transmission to a colleague came the next morning, time-stamped 0612 CET. They built it again. Continuum wasn't theory, it's alive. That message was sent from a prepaid phone registered under no name. Hartmann has not been seen since. The apartment in Geneva was cleared within a week, her notes confiscated for national review. Authorities denied any investigation was underway. The Morgenrot Continuum file, her life's work, remains sealed in the custody of an unnamed European defense consortium. Today, the forests of Bavaria stand quiet, their soil concealing what history refused to remember. Beneath them, the hum persists, a relic of an experiment that promised energy without fuel and silence through fire. Morgenrot was never destroyed. It evolved, It migrated and it adapted, crossing borders and ideologies alike. In the end, what began as a desperate wartime experiment to defy collapse became something far more enduring, a continuum of secrecy, buried deep within the infrastructure of the modern world, humming beneath our feet, unseen and waiting,